So when it comes to the internet, how much should someone share about their own personal life versus how much should they keep private? That's a question that I often really think about, and I wanted to talk about that today in this concept of transparency, the paradox of transparency, and even not just when it comes to the internet, but in your relationships, and stuff of that nature. So, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Denzel Mensah. I'm an ENFJ 911 life, personal development, and relationship coach. And today we are going to be talking about the paradox of transparency and how or when you should be using it. Let's get it. I've always valued transparency. I always valued it in other people who are very honest, who are very raw about what they're going through, about what they've already been through, about things that they are struggling not to go through, things of that nature. I've always really deeply admired it, and I've further respected such people for that. But at the same time, I also understand how difficult it might be to unveil a lot of those things because truth of the matter is people aren't always having your best interest at heart. A lot of times, people are ready to just kind of leap on, whatever things that you're being transparent about so they can kind of like gossip about it, so they can kind of like, oh yeah, you see, do you know this about so-and-so, or do you know this about so-and-so, and rather than using it to like actually like help themselves. And then sometimes that same transparency can also affect other people. And a lot of times it's then not best to be as transparent because of the effect that it has on other people. Like I said, I value transparency. And as a YouTuber, I'm often conflicted with how much should I share about my own personal life with you guys and how much should I keep private. And usually it comes down to those two reasons. I really often do not have a problem sharing things that I go through, sharing things that I am going through, such as I made a video quite a few years ago called Eating Elephants, and it was kind of like an impromptu video. And in that video, I was talking about a friend of mine who came to me and was asking for help on a certain issue that he's dealing with. And then I ended up unveiling to him like, yo, honestly, I have the same issue. And we started to talk about like the ways that we battle that issue, the way that we constantly wake up every day just trying to take it like day by day, step by step. I gave a whole analogy about like daily ointment. I used the passage from the Bible where the Apostle Paul talks about having a thorn in his flesh and how there's this one thing that's always itching at him every single day. And essentially in that video, I spoke about how it's not even about removing the thorn, because a lot of times God isn't trying to remove the thorn. He's trying to still keep you human. Or that's just not even that he's trying to keep you human, but that's just kind of what a human being is. Like as human beings, we are always going to be flawed. We're always going to be struggling in some way, shape, or form. And we're going to always like have at least one thorn, one demon that we are facing with, And sometimes it's not about destroying it, but continuing to face it until the day that you die, which sounds so morbid. And even then, my views on that has changed a little bit since then. But I think that what I'm saying here is still applicable. Where when I started talking about ointment in that video, and you can go ahead and check it out whenever you get the chance. I go a lot deeper than what I'm going to do over here because this isn't really the focus, but it is relevant. With that ointment, I pretty much talk about like applying ointment every day, because the more that you scratch that thorn every day, then the worse that it can get. But when you apply the ointment daily, then eventually, like every single day, you're scratching the thorn less. Now the thorn is still there, but it's no longer something that you're going to be constantly scratching. Now, sometimes we forget to apply the ointment, or sometimes we neglect applying that ointment because we like the feeling of it being scratched, even though we don't like the itch itself. But we'll allow the itch to happen because when we scratch it, it feels good rather than applying ointment. Again, very conceptual, abstract, and all of that. The ointment could be prayer, the ointment could be meditation, the ointment could be like certain accountability, stuff like that. But anyway, the reason why I bring up that video is because in that video, I'm pretty sure that, and I knew this when I was recording it, I'm pretty sure that people who are listening and paying certain attention to it, they could kind of key in and clue in on like, oh, this might be the struggle or the thorn that Denzel is talking about at the time. But obviously I didn't explicitly state it. I realized that I have a tendency to be cryptic in that manner. It goes right back to another video called Nuanced Nudity, where in that video, a YouTuber, an older YouTuber, had said something about the ENFJ personality type and how we tend to invite everybody to be vulnerable, but then when somebody unexpectedly like gets us to be vulnerable in a different type of vulnerable position, then we kind of like swiftly shift the attention back on everyone else rather than exposing our own vulnerability, like our own transparency. And I said in that video as a response that I think it's because ENFJs are often aware that the same naked body that can arouse certain people can be the exact same naked body that could disgust other people. And a lot of times the ENFJ just wants to be aware of like, okay, who am I going to disgust and who am I going to arouse? Again, metaphorically speaking, of course. But with that notion, it's like, okay, you can't just lob this out onto YouTube where who knows how many people will see the video and who knows how many people are going to be aroused and how many people are going to be disgusted. Now, if you're trying to have a following where it's like, well, yeah, I'm trying to disgust certain people because I want only the people that are aroused, that's one way that things can work. And that's where using transparency and being as real as Tyler, the Creator, can really get you a certain niche following. And that's something that can like really help you, as long as you're also okay with a lot of other people knowing your business and everything and hating you almost just as strongly as other people might love you and relate to you. I think I try to tend to go with the more balanced route, especially when I'm trying to work through certain things, especially because for me, it's like, okay, I might have been struggling with that thorn then, but I've actually kind of overcome it, or I've like been able to tame that dragon. And now there's probably just a different dragon, you know, new levels, new devils kind of thing. So you start to really like understand like a little bit of a difference there. You know what I'm saying? Now, one of the ways that I still try to hit that middle ground is by at least informing y'all that, kind of like I did in my last video on shadow work, that I am not perfect. That way, when/if I ever do unveil things, because I usually do intend to unveil things just at a proper time, when I'm ready, when I've already worked through it, or when I am at a better pinnacle point of working through it, and when I have a better gauge of how it's going to land with the people that I'm actually trying to help. Then it's like, okay, let me share this, you know, but I do at least let people know in advance, like, hey, some things about me might be surprising to you. Some things also probably not. The goal is so that things no longer are surprising to people and I can ease them into it so that it can just be a full-on menage of transparency and, you know, realness, and everyone kind of being real with each other so that we can help each other in a way. But that's kind of an ideal that needs to be slowly worked toward. And so the transparency mainly comes out with not only saying like, you know, I'm not perfect, but then kind of like leaving these like clues to let people know like, hey, just so you know, there are things that, yeah, even Denzel is struggling with. Definitely that Denzel struggles with. But the thing is, he's trying to like manage and like, you know, against every day. And one of the reasons why he doesn't go into detail about these things is because of how it might land with certain people. And it might not help them to know the specific details, especially maybe not at this point in time. But then in more private things such as like coaching calls, or, like when things are like in a better gauged environment, then I actually am able to go even way more personal because I know who I'm talking to. I know how it's going to land. I know if it's going to be helpful and it's not going to be TMI of some sort. But there's other reasons that somebody might avoid being completely transparent in a detailed manner. And that other reason could also be that it involves other people. Valuing transparency often fosters intimacy. It fosters trust. So this is good because then people are able to see like, oh yeah, you're real. Like you are always going to tell what you're struggling with, what you're not struggling with. You're going to be real with your emotions. You're going to be real with your struggles. You are a real human being. And people usually love that. That's a good thing to have. Again, I admire that and I value that. But there is a time where honesty might not be the best policy. Why you might be giving too much information and it's actually ruining you, or even worse, sometimes worse. I guess it depends on who you are. For me, it would be worse when it's ruining other people. Because if, for example, you are involved in a situation where you are selling drugs. I am not selling drugs, by the way, because it's just an example before somebody hops on that. But yeah, if you're like selling drugs, if you're like part of a group and y'all are like selling drugs and everything like that, and you are now put in a situation where you want to be transparent and you want to share with your girlfriend or at a job interview, with your mother, with the police, whoever it might be, like, honestly, I'm gonna be transparent. Like, yeah, I've been selling drugs because I'm trying to like, get my money up so I can go to college, or so that I can just like move up out of the hood, or so that I can honestly just become rich and like help my mom get a new house, whatever it might be. That type of transparency, that's okay for you to share for yourself. But then if you're like transparent to the point where it's like, yeah, me and like if they're like, so how do you sell the drugs and everything? Well, my boy Keto over there, like he gives me the kilos, and now you're just selling other people out that are involved that weren't ready for their business to be out there. That's a bit too much. So when you're being transparent, you have to be aware of how your transparency might be affecting other people who are not ready to be as transparent maybe as you are. And then that's often a hard place to balance, because how do you value where you are versus also how other people are being affected? I had a friend who was dating somebody else, and while he was dating someone else, then he had this sort of, pretty much they had a very bad breakup. And he made music about this girlfriend or ex-girlfriend of his. And the people closest to him knew who he was talking about. We all knew who he was talking about. And he was kind of going like detailed in these lyrics a little bit. And everyone's like, and I remember talking to this friend and being like, yo, it's kind of a difficult situation, like to be in, where it's like he pretty much expressed to me like, yeah, like I'm not trying to like sell her out, but this is my story too. Like, when can I just share my story, even if it has to also affect her? And that's a tricky thing. You're trying to be transparent, like, this is what I did, but this is why I did it, and these are my flaws, and boom, boom, boom. But then what if his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend didn't really want people to know these details about how their relationship was like, and, stuff of that nature? It's a hard thing to like balance, And so that's another situation where transparency might be a bit too much, and you have to be a little bit more measured with it. And kind of like I said before, some people just also don't really deserve your transparency. They look for the things that you share, not so they can pray for you, not so they can help you, but rather just so they can like shame you and hurt you and, pretty much like make things worse about you. Like, if I had a drinking problem, for example, I remember that I've always kind of been the person too, where it's like, there's there's been times where it's like, you know, if I did have a drinking problem, then I wouldn't want to like share it with other people, because then it becomes a little bit their burden, you know? Because now if I'm showing up to different, like, you know, parties or whatever, and I've always had a good way of being able to watch myself with like alcohol or something like that. But then now I told this one friend that I have a drinking problem. Once again, I don't have a drinking problem, but just an example. They probably could have like told everybody, oh, just so you know, like, remember, nobody drink alcohol around Denzel. I don't need you to protect me from that. And then it makes you start thinking like, maybe I shouldn't have been as detailed and transparent with you, because now you're taking it a bit too far. You're doing too much to try to protect me from myself, when I've been good for the past however long. If I need your help, I'll let you know. But please do not go these extra steps in order to do so. Or if you see me taking one drink, then don't like shriek, oh my gosh, you should know better. Because then it's like, dang, I really shouldn't have been as vulnerable and intimate and transparent with you, because now you're taking things too far. And I feel like we all have dealt with people like that. And we might even be those people to somebody else. Be careful of that. Another reason why it's probably best to avoid being too transparent with certain people is because the truth of the matter is a lot of them also can't really handle it. So say, for example, you get into a relationship with someone, you know, and right at the beginning of the relationship, then you start to share all of these things about like suicidal ideations that you might have, and you know, just what, like stuff of that nature, you know, like in certain traumas that you've gone through. And the person is still in the early stages of getting to know you. You did a good thing. Obviously, you were being transparent, you were being open, and maybe in certain situations, that is best for somebody to be aware of early on before they're getting hit with it later. So that also makes it a little bit more tricky. But another thing to consider is, honestly, babies drink milk before they start eating meat. So what do I mean by that? A new relationship, or a relationship in general, is kind of like a person, right? I usually view them as almost like a third entity. There's you, there's the other person, and then there's the entity that you guys have now bred. And so that new entity, if it's a new relationship, is a baby of some sort. And you don't want to start feeding the baby steak so that you can get it to grow in your efforts to grow. You want to feed it milk. You want to start off with the small talk things. Hey, what's your favorite color? Oh, what kind of movies do you like? Oh, okay, like, you know, you start off small and grow from there. And then you start slowly sharing a little bit more about myself. Like, yeah, you know, oh yeah, this is how a little bit like my relationship with my dad is like. Or like, yeah, you know, I really kind of like did bad in school. I dropped out, like whatever it might be. And eventually you progress to the point where you start feeding chicken and steak and all of that. Yeah, honestly, I struggle with, you know, I don't want to like trigger anyone, but cutting myself or, you know, stuff like that, you know, like, and you start being like more real and more transparent about your struggles and your vulnerabilities there when you're better able to gauge how strong the relationship is and how it's going to affect the other person. Because you don't know, that might really trigger the other person. Maybe they also have those same struggles. And instead of being like, wow, I struggle with that too, I can help you, they might now be like, oh, wow, I used to struggle with that. And now that you're telling me this, then that's like triggering me in a way that's gonna now make me also want to do the same thing, you know, something of that nature. You have to be careful with your transparency at times, because your own burdens can also become somebody else's burden. But then also we live in this world where you don't want to be holding burdens by yourself. So transparency, once again, and I really want to emphasize this, it sounds like I'm saying two different things in this video. It's a very complex topic that, honestly, to be transparent, I'm still working through myself. I'm still trying to understand this balance, this dance of when sharing too much might be too much and how it affects other people, and when it's actually the best thing to do. But that's one example where it's like, again, remember that babies are also usually drinking milk before they start to eat meat. So in the same thing with relationships, make sure that you're growing closer more progressively and slowly. Another example, and honestly, this one's a personal example, could be when you're in a job interview. Sometimes you can be a little bit too transparent, and before you know it, you're not getting that job, even though you would have been a great fit for it. When you're at a job interview and they ask you, like, so, what are some things that you struggle with? And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I actually struggled with boom, 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 boom. And you start naming a whole bunch of stuff that might even just be irrelevant information for that job. All of a sudden, they might not even be necessarily judging you for the things that you actually struggled with, but they might be judging you for sharing those things because they didn't totally ask for that or they didn't expect that. And so now you're not getting the job. Now, I didn't go that badly, but there was a time some years ago where I applied for this Christian camp, right? And I really thought that I would have made a great, leader over there, would have helped out with like the teenagers, the kids and stuff like that. And the interviewers really liked me, and I could tell up until one point when they asked me a question along the lines of, so what are some things that like some cons, I think, or like what are the pros and cons? Like what cons do you come with? Something of that nature. And I was trying to be transparent. And so I told them that, well, maybe like a negative trait of mine is that sometimes, and I should have worded it better, but I pretty much said, sometimes I just don't really like to help. And I started to elaborate that I think I said something like, I don't really have like a servant spirit. Again, my wording was just horrible. And I just knew immediately after I was done talking, or a little bit toward the end when I had already started, but it was by then too late. So I was like, well, I just got to drive this into the ground and just see where we go from there. But pretty much what I said was that I'm the type of person, and this is still true to this day, where if I'm at like the end of a party or the end of an event, and then people are like putting stuff away or like they're cleaning or whatever, usually I just bow out. Like I don't often feel this urge or this inclination to help with putting stuff away or to help with cleaning, because in my head I'm usually like, there's like 20 other people already doing this. What is one extra body going to really do? And a lot of times I really just get in the way. Like I'm just like kind of sitting there like, okay, so where do I put this table? And then all these other people are doing really good work. They already know exactly what they're doing. And so I just need instruction. But then me always asking for instruction every 5 seconds, like, hey, where do I put this chair? Where do I put this table? Hey, Joel, where do you want me to put these cords? Stuff like that. Like it's distracting them from doing the job. And if anything, I feel like I'm slowing them down. So I feel like it's a favor for me to just kind of like bow out and stay out of their way instead. And for that reason, I don't really view myself as having a servant spirit in that way, which I know is so weird for an ENFJ. But hey, I'm still a 9, I'm not a 2. But when I said that for this Christian camp interview, I'm positive that that's the reason why I did not get that job. And I definitely learned my lesson. Transparency is not bad, but too much of it can be too much. And now I'm more calculated and careful, mainly with how I word things while still being honest and transparent with whatever struggles that I might have. So I might even just say like something that I'm working through is being more of a servant. I'm trying to learn to actually be one of the first people to actually go and help out with putting away chairs and with putting away tables and stuff like that. That could have been a better way of framing it during that job interview, as opposed to like, yeah, well, since you asked for like a negative of mine, then, here's me being transparent and honest so that you can be like, wow, people don't usually know what's negative about themselves and stuff like that, let alone say it. So that shows how honest and transparent you are, and we want you on our team. No, it worked against me. So there's a really definitely like a balance that one must strike when it comes to transparency. And I guess if this video has made sense to you at all, I'm going to go ahead and just summarize a few things. And that's pretty much what should you consider when you're trying to be transparent, whether it be in a relationship, whether it be in a job, interview, whether it be on YouTube, whatever it might be. And number one would be, who is your audience? You know, how is it going to affect them? Like, if you're sharing this information, you know, what is your goal with that? You know, like, is it to help them? Is it to help them see like, wow, you know what, I do this too, and this is that, and I'm working through it? Or is it just something that's going to be like not helpful to their to their well-being? You know, so know who your audience is. Number two, you should also understand, does this involve and harm/hurt other people? If it does, well, then you got to be careful of that. You know, you don't want to involve other people into your mess just because you want to be transparent in some type of way, shape, or form. You know, you have to be careful with like, okay, I think that this might affect my wife if I share this or if I share that, which for me, it definitely has. There's been times in YouTube videos where Jamila's a very private person. And so she's like, Denzel, why did you say that part? And I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. You know, I thought that it would help people, but like, okay, I'm going to word it this way differently, you know, which is still being honest, but it doesn't really involve you, you know, it doesn't really affect you, you know, unless if somebody's reading like that hard, which that means that person probably should get a life. But anyway, and thirdly, is this the right time? Can this person actually take it? You know, once again, who's your audience? But also, is this the right time? Some people are actually capable of handling your transparency, but sometimes certain levels of transparency is better from later on in the relationship than rather than in the beginning. You know, now, of course, if it's something very detrimental, then you don't want to also like trap the person and then be like, so now that I have you here attached to me, let me share all of these things. You don't want to do that either. But you want to be careful with also not sharing too much right away at the beginning of the dynamic. And then all of a sudden the person is like, whoa, 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 I just met you, dude. You know what I mean? Or like, hello, sir, this is the McDonald's. You know what I mean? So be careful of the setting, like the time, the timing of when you're trying to share that transparency, as well as who the person might be. Like, again, going back to like that audience. And yeah, I've been a little bit distracted in this video because I have visitors over that are like kind of like a little bit loud right now, but so sorry a little bit about the spaciness, but hopefully this all has made sense. If you would like to leave any comments, questions, concerns, drop them in the comments section below. If you would love coaching session, then make sure to hit me up at denzelmensah.com. I would love to see you over there. And we can talk about these things on an even deeper, more personal, transparent level. If you have tips for me, go ahead and leave them. I would love to hear them. I'm always working on how to be better. What is enough to share, what isn't enough to share, stuff of that nature, what might actually help people. So yeah, hit me with all of that. And yeah, thanks for taking time to watch this video, and do not forget, you matter. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video, and if you enjoyed that, please like and subscribe. It actually really helps out my channel a lot, so that more people who actually care about what I want to say can actually find me a lot more easier. Also, if you did enjoy it, then maybe you'll enjoy a lot of my other content as well, so be sure to check out some of my playlists where you'll be able to find a lot of my older videos and older content. And last but not least, if you would like any profiling sessions or coaching sessions, be sure to check out denzelmensah.com, where you'll be able to book me and you'll see the rest of my services. But thanks again, and have a great day.